Explosives found again just across the border in the Mexican state of Tamaulipas.
I never in a million years really thought that we would be seeing that so close to home.
Why should we care?
People thinking, well, I'm just commuting to work. I'm just commuting to see my family. And now I have to worry about terrorist-like devices.
And how will the president's executive order making cartels foreign terrorist organizations affect us? And why does the cartel's activity south of the border affect our everyday lives?
It would affect everything if we stop trade with Mexico.
Thanks for joining us again for another edition of Immigration Crisis, the fight for the southern border. I'm Yami Virgin from Sinclair Broadcasting in San Antonio, Texas, and we're going to go straight to the news that broke this weekend, just across the border from the Rio Grande Valley in Texas. Explosives being placed by cartels on Mexican roads that are used for a lot of business. A lot of American businesses have brick and mortar stores and factories in the state of Tamaulipas. Our Jordan Elder has the report.
Don't touch, don't move, don't manipulate. Residents in Tamaulipas, which is across the border from Brownsville, woke up to a concerning message. Cartels are placing explosives like these along the roads.
It's a shame that those are images I thought I left behind in the combat zone in Iraq and Afghanistan. And now I never in a million years really thought that we would be seeing that so close to home.
Patricia Driscoll grew up along the border, later serving as a military contractor.
People who are from there, we don't think of our Mexican border as a war zone, and we don't want to.
She says this message is alarming for people in border cities who cross back and forth every day.
People thinking, well, I'm just commuting to work. I'm just commuting to see my family. And now I have to worry about terrorist-like devices.
This is a 24-hour command center that we have here in the border on the U.S. side.
Security experts like Jorge Luis Cisneros are watching these threats closely. His company provides protection for companies in the U.S. and Mexico.
The cartels are fighting each other, but they're not looking to hurt Americans or any travelers that are foreigners.
Some are still worried this could be retaliation or a warning. President Trump signing an executive order this week designating drug cartels as foreign terrorist organizations.
I'm not sure that it changes their behaviors anymore, but it is definitely time for them to see that the United States is not going to allow it to continue business as usual.
Long-term violence could have big impacts on the economies of both countries.
Millions and millions of dollars that are coming back and forth, and we have to protect the people that are involved or working there.
Congressman Tony Gonzalez represents several of those border cities. He tells us action is being taken to curtail cartel activity. Quote, Mexico needs to play a vital role in this, and current interactions between the United States and Mexico's government officials are rooted in improving safety and security initiatives across the board. So far, there haven't been major threats in cities like El Paso, Eagle Pass, or Del Rio, but as tensions rise, officials are urging travelers to be careful.
Thank you, Jordan, for that. Now, this is why I love the podcast. We can go to the raw interviews used for our regular stories. What you're about to hear are all the thoughts our interviewees had on the subject. Here's the raw interview I did with Patricia Driscoll. Your area of expertise is security, but you're very familiar with the U.S.-Mexico border. The article that I sent you is talking about the explosives that have been found in Tamaulipas that are being put allegedly by the cartels. Why should we care, and how does this affect business on both sides of the border?
The reason that this is so important is because we have a long-standing relationship in Mexico. We are neighbors. We are family. We do business on both sides of the border. We're very dependent on each other for our commerce, for our business, for our livelihood. Our families live across the way. I grew up in El Paso on the border, and it is I can't tell you how many people go back and forth every single day to work. And I can't imagine how scary this must be to see these reports, because we had one in December too, where a shootout led to 10 IEDs being found on the Mexican side. And it's really scary to people thinking, well, I'm just commuting to work. I'm just commuting to see my family. And now I have to worry about terrorist-like devices. I mean, this is the stuff that we were seeing in Iraq and Afghanistan, and we've dealt with in a war zone. But no one thinks of our Mexican border, people who are from there, we don't think of our Mexican border as a war zone, and we don't want to.
I think a lot of people, and you hit it on the nose, a lot of people don't realize the amount of business, import, export that is done between the US and Mexico. There are a lot of companies that specialize in doing security, even from here, for example, for HEBs, for the Walmarts in Tamaulipas. How difficult is it to keep things safe in another country, especially one right now that the president just signed an executive order naming the cartels FTOs?
So I don't know how much it's going to change the cartel activity, recognizing them for what they are, which is terrorists. You know, they have terrorized communities and businesses for a very long time. It has seemed to have escalated. The cartels that I grew up with in El Paso had lines, had very defined rules. They didn't target women and children. There were certain businesses they left alone because they realized commerce is the backbone of both of our communities. We depend very heavily on the produce that's coming from Mexico, for example. The United States, our grocery bills are already extremely high, but can you imagine now with the additional security costs, or the fact that these trucks are getting hijacked or blown up, something like that starts to happen on a regular basis, all the costs will rise in doing business in Mexico, which will affect our purchasing in the United States. No matter how much we're trying to curb inflation, this is only going to increase the cost of our produce, for example. But all of our goods and services coming across. But we should never have to worry about the safety of our family members or our businesses and our products going back and forth across the bridge. I mean, we have such a huge law enforcement presence, both on the Mexican side and the US side. And it's just scary to think that these are wars and things that we thought happened in the barrio, and they didn't happen at the bridge. They didn't happen in places where we're commuting. And now it's something that we really need to be concerned about. But Trump naming them a terrorist organization, I'm not sure that it changes their behaviors anymore. But it is definitely time for them to see that the United States is not going to allow it to continue business as usual, and that we're going to take this seriously. We have launched our military down back on the border. That's something we haven't done in 4+ years. Our military has been removed from many of the border operations over this last administration. So day one, hour one, they're seeing Trump is very serious in the fact that he's putting people down there and won't hesitate to do something about an attack that he sees on the United States.
How important is it to keep the companies that are over there doing business, the US companies that are over there, the businessmen that go over? I've gone with a few of them into Juarez when they're doing business just to see their security and what they do. If they can't go into Mexico, specifically in the border states, and feel safe, how will that affect what they do? And even if they set up maquiladoras, the fabrics on the other side to give work to Mexicans.
So the maquilas are a very big part of our border communities and our businesses and our way of life, both on the US and on the Mexican side. And if you can't feel safe, businesses are going to have to make a business decision and decide whether or not Mexico is the right place for them to do business anymore. And that becomes a big danger, because now you're talking about serious unemployment on both sides of the border. It isn't just the impact on prices, but companies saying, hey, you know what, if we can't operate safely here, if our executives can't go back and forth, we're just going to have to go to Malaysia. I mean, it starts pushing our businesses back into other countries instead of bringing it closer to home, which I do know was one of President Trump's goals, was to continue to grow manufacturing back into the United States. But we can't do that without the partnership from Mexico. We always had a great partnership in that, but we saw that as prices went down, as security got bad, companies started to leave the border communities and they started to go to China. They started to go to Malaysia to set up shop over there.
The images that I sent you that were sent out by the government of the state of Tamaulipas, it says, don't touch, don't move, and don't handle it. What are those images there on that warning that went out to everybody?
Those are warnings on, just like we used to have in Afghanistan, of stay on your path and don't pick up things that you don't know what the heck they are, because they could be an incendiary device. It could be a bomb. It could be all, you just don't know what it is. And it's a shame that those are images I thought I left behind in the combat zone in Iraq and Afghanistan. And now, here we are seeing mine signs. I never in a million years really thought that we would be seeing that so close to home. It is a shame.
The president of Mexico, Claudia Sheinbaum, said this week in a speech about 5 days ago when President Trump was sworn in, when he signed the FTO, she's particularly and specifically said, we are a separate country. We will defend our sovereignty, and the U.S. needs to take care of their business, basically, on their side. We will take care of our business, and we need to communicate. I think a lot of people don't understand what that FTO also means. It allows certain things to be done by the United States, right?
Yes, when you designate a certain group as a terrorist organization, it does give us other authorities and powers to go after it. And it is recognized by the rest of the world as, hey, it might be happening in your country, but if they are doing things to target our citizens and target our safety, we also have a right to respond. And nobody likes that because, it puts us in kind of a combat zone right next door. But some people will say, well, that's where we've been. And it's time that somebody starts finally recognizing it. Maybe in this order that Trump has put out, Mexico will see that this administration is very different from the last one. And we are going to work together to resolve this problem. We're going to have to do it together. But maybe it was time for somebody to see he's serious and he's not going to take these actions lightly. And we're not going to allow things to escalate. We're not going to allow our businesses to disappear from either side of the border. It's not to either one of our benefits. So I feel like we have to work together. But, Trump goes in hard. Everybody says it's part of his negotiating tactic. He's going to come in and take over the canal. He can't do that in Panama, but, he can come in and say very bold things. He can go put the military on the border and say, okay, come on, let's talk. I'm serious. So let's talk about what it's going to take to get both of us on the same page when it comes to security for both of our countries. So in so many of the changes that we've seen in the past week, we've also seen Trump name a new chief of the Border Patrol and make that chief a political position that reports directly to the President of the United States, which is highly unusual. We've never had a chief who was political. At the same time, Texas has now left a vacancy with its Texas border czar. So maybe Texas will pick up a good friend of the Border Patrol, a good friend of the current chief, and bring Chief Jason Owens down there and help Texas be a part of that conversation. Because remember, it's not just a federal government conversation. It is a state level conversation. And here in the state of Texas, we need to make sure that we are actually taking charge and being a big part of that conversation, because it is also our DPS, our sheriffs, and our communities that are dealing with these big federal level decisions.
What's the importance of having a border czar in Texas? Is it because of the geography and being right next to it?
I think having a border czar in Texas is extremely important. Governor Abbott did a very smart thing when he made that position to let people know, look, it's not just a DPS thing. It's not just a sheriff thing. I, at a state level, care very much about our infrastructure, our technologies, our building the wall, because it's not just the federal government responsible for our safety, that we take that very seriously in the state of Texas. So I think it was a brilliant thing that he's done. You know, and Texas is re-looking at how they are going to secure the border no matter what administration is in place in Washington, D.C. Texas knows that they need to be thinking about its future. And I like the fact that they've come up with the czar, so maybe that guy gets a seat at the table because he should be in the middle of all these conversations so the state of Texas is not left out.
Thanks, Patricia. We also spoke to a former FBI agent in that story with Jordan. Jorge Luis Cisneros is the president of Safe Track LLC, a security company providing security for American and Mexican companies on both sides of the border. Here's the raw interview with Cisneros from his remote security headquarters in McAllen, Texas. All right, Jorge. So when I sent you the warning that they put out in Tamaulipas, I'm sure you guys were already aware of this and why.
Yes, ma'am. We have been, obviously, we monitor the threats, if you will, that are happening along the U.S.-Mexican border and Mexico for that, for our clients. Want to make sure that they stay out of harm's way. There is, there's been reports of explosives and things like that here in the region. Tamaulipas being one of the hotbeds, but it's typically they're targeting, the cartels are fighting each other. And then in the middle of that, the military gets involved as well. So it's a quagmire of different things, but they're not looking to hurt Americans or any travelers that are foreigners.
What's the impact of business? And I know you provide services for several U.S. companies and Texas companies in Tamaulipas. What is the impact of the business of U.S. business to those areas on the other side of the border? Millions
and millions of dollars are basically transient from U.S. to Mexico, Mexico to U.S. It would affect everything if we stop trade with Mexico here. And like I said, there's not only monies as far as the commerce, but there's people that go back and forth and depend on their jobs. One of the things here regionally we deal with are the maquiladoras, which are the plants, U.S. plants, international plants that are across the border in Mexico, and their engineers, their management teams go over there daily. So that would create a great, problem, and that's what we want as monitors, basically.
How important is it for you guys to have your finger on the pulse of what's going on the other side, but also on this side? I mean, there is spillage. There is some of that on this side.
Yes, yeah.
We don't call them cartels, but we call them gangs.
Yes. No, we monitor daily, hourly. I mean, we're involved with the different internet programs we have, and obviously we have sources throughout Mexico that help us also, human sources that facilitate information to us and keep people, again, out of harm's way.
For anybody that sees this, that doesn't live in Texas, how would you explain the relationship between businesses on both sides of the border, and for it to be secure, not just on this side of the border, but on the other side? Right.
Again, the businesses like we protect. I mean, there's millions and millions of dollars that are coming back and forth, and we have to protect the people that are involved or working there. Not everybody is bad, and obviously the concern is with the cartels that they're fighting, and we try to keep up with the trends that's going on with them. But it's super important to basically keep people safe. And that's our job and our mission.
Yeah, your mission every day is to keep your clients safe and their interests in Mexico too, right?
Yes, ma'am.
What would happen if these businesses, U.S. businesses, pulled out of Mexico?
Oh, it would be a tremendous detriment to everybody here. I mean, you can imagine the economy would sure fall or falter. There's hundreds of companies that are operating on the Mexican side that have interests in this trade.
What kind of goods are we talking about?
Everything from medical supplies, medical equipment to automotive supplies, automotive parts, things like that. And of course, in our region here, here in Fort Texas, probably we have the biggest import of produce in the country.
Other than the produce that are coming in, I mean, that it's a symbiotic relationship. I don't think people can
Yeah, by all means. I mean, we restrict. Let me say this again. Both countries, have benefits out of this relationship. It's been around so long.
Friends, that is all for now on another edition of Immigration Crisis, the fight for the southern border. I'm Yami Virgin for Sinclair Broadcasting in San Antonio, Texas, being the eyes and ears of what's happening on the southern border for more than 20 years. Until next time.